So this is the Citizens Press Conference, and thank you very much for attending our conference today, and a very warm welcome from us. Our conference today will first begin with speeches by our Chinese and English speakers, followed by speeches from our guests from the Hospital Authority Employees Alliance, from the district councils, and from the Immigration Department, where the speech for the Immigration Department will be presented by one of our speakers in place of him, as he cannot attend today. Finally, we shall have a question and answer section. We would like to thank Radical HK once again for sending in their sign language interpreters. For the benefit of Mr. Leung and the HKSAR cabinet, may we also demonstrate once again today the possibility of speaking while donning a face mask. So the next section will be the speech by the English speaker, and I wish to remind our friends from the press that we have a sign language interpreter from Radical HK, and for the benefit of all our fellow citizens, you may also live stream on our interpreter as well. Thank you.
It is almost ironic that at the start of the Year of the Rat, the Chinese Communist Party's generous gift to the world is a deadly epidemic. It is tragic and infuriating that the Communist Party and the Hong Kong government has not learned from their failure with SARS epidemic in 2003. Let us not forget, it was the Chinese government's deliberate cover-up and misreporting that allowed the epidemic to ravage through 30 countries and claim 299 lives in Hong Kong. Many of them are honorable frontline medics. 17 years later, the Communist Party is still prioritizing salvaging its political image by deciding to lock down Wuhan only after the critical disease interception timeframe has passed. HKU's Professor Guan, whose research on SARS helped identify its infectious source and avert a second outbreak in 2004, predicted that the Wuhan coronavirus situation will be 10 times worse than SARS. Hong Kong's experience with SARS should have readied the government for combating public health crises like the present one. Instead, what they've done is an abysmal failure, performing worse than even some mainland cities. They've tried to kill us by indiscriminately beating up protesters, medics, and citizens on August 31st. They tried to kill us by firing live rounds against student protesters. And now they're trying to kill us by leaving Hong Kong vulnerable to one of the deadliest epidemics in the history of mankind, just to appease their masters in Beijing. This epidemic is now a global disaster, and all countries are endeavoring their best to address this catastrophe. Singapore and the Philippines have turned away arrivals from Wuhan. Taiwan has demanded that Wuhan visitors must leave and declared export restrictions on face masks. France and the US have even started evacuating their nationals. The Hong Kong government, however, continues to play politics, refusing to publicly tell its citizens to wear a mask, using ludicrous excuses such as wearing a face mask is socially unacceptable, or you can't speak through a face mask, in preparation for appealing the unconstitutional anti-mask ban law. The Wuhan coronavirus has now spread to all of China, and those infected from Wuhan are rushing into our hospitals, endangering the health of frontline immigration officers, custom personnel, and medics. Despite this, Carrie Lam insists that travel restrictions are politically inappropriate. Even the bare minimum of voluntary health declaration forms was not implemented from the get-go. When racing against a deadly disease such as this, every second the Hong Kong government wastes could potentially take a life. The inaction of this incapable government shouldn't mean we have to resign ourselves to the impending doom of the epidemic. The Citizens Press Conference hereby urges everyone to protect themselves and those around them. Wear masks in public and wash your hands frequently. Avoid crowded areas and do not visit China. We also demand that the government immediately seal off the mainland border or risk an immediate strike. This is the most effective measure to prevent the coronavirus from entering Hong Kong and causing community outbreaks. Mainlanders can enter Hong Kong by ferry, through the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, by plane, or by the high-speed rail. It was only after the threat of a strike by doctors and nurses that Carrie Lam belatedly restrict all Hubei citizens and people who have visited Hubei in the last 2 weeks from entering Hong Kong. But as HKU Professor Yuen Kwok Yung has stated, we have already missed a crucial time period when travel restrictions would actually be effective. These travel restrictions are even more useless when they come after all transport in and out of Wuhan has been cut off. The coronavirus has now spread all over China as a result of the mass exodus from Wuhan right before its lockdown. During the incubation period, the infected show no symptoms, which makes it near impossible to identify and keep them from entering Hong Kong. All visitors have to be checked individually by immigration officers, placing immigration officers at extremely high risk. All this does is only raise the chances of an Amoy Garden 2.0, another community outbreak. The Citizens Press Conference fully supports the doctors' strike on Monday. We reiterate our demands: indefinite suspension of this entry of Chinese citizens until the situation is under control, and mandatory screening for all returning Hong Kongers to determine whether they should be immediately sent to hospitals or quarantined. Some may question the ethics of doctors going on strike, that they are bound to the Hippocratic Oath. It is important to look at the bigger picture here. The hospital authority statistics have shown that the percentage of occupied beds in public hospitals stand at an extraordinarily high 80 to 90%, with the highest being at 115%. Our public hospitals are now on the verge of collapse, but the Department of Health continues to let Chinese citizens with fever symptoms free Sha Tao Kok for alleged humanitarian reasons. There have been reports of patients rejecting quarantine, even pulling off the mask from the face of a medic and coughing intentionally onto unprotected staffers. Our hospitals are now flooded with potential patients from the mainland, robbing the already scarce public healthcare resources from our local citizens. The government has failed their duty to care for their citizens' health, and that includes that of the healthcare staff. Doctors and nurses do not have an unqualified duty to provide their services. In the face of unfair treatment and coercion, it is only right for doctors to go on strike. We fully support the decision to initiate potential industry action on Monday. The right to go on strike is a fundamental entitlement universally acknowledged for all occupations, and healthcare workers are no exception. Hong Kong people must stand up to this moral coercion. The Hong Kong government's complete disregard for the safety of Hong Kongers was demonstrated again when yesterday it was revealed they had discreetly planned on using unoccupied public housing as quarantine zones in Fanling. Prior to the decision, the government has not consulted any parties or even informed district councillors in the area, a clear disregard and contravention of procedural justice. It is common knowledge that quarantine zones must be placed in isolated, sparsely populated areas, but they are placed at a mere 30 meters away from the closest residential building, in the close proximity of 5 schools. This places the tens of thousands living in the nearby area at extremely high risk. The ensuing public outroar saw people of different ends of the political spectrum coming together to protest against the government. In response to the mass public outrage, all that the government has done is agree to halt the movement of supplies and even try to deny that there were ever plans to use the public residential buildings as quarantine zones. This was eventually revealed to be another lie from the government when reporters discovered the rooms had already been set up for quarantine purposes. It is imperative that we must seal our borders to prevent the disease from spreading in Hong Kong. Researchers from the UK and US have estimated that for every 20 infected persons in Wuhan, only 1 of them has been reported in government statistics, and that by the 4th of February, the population of Wuhan infected will reach 270,000. Wuhan's mayor stated that there have been 5 million people who fled from Wuhan before the proper lockdown. It is very likely that the carriers of the virus are all over China, if not over the globe. Microbiologist Professor Yuen Kwok-Yung has stated it is already too late to close down borders, and that the coming few days will be the absolute last window of time available for the government to intercept the spread of virus within Hong Kong. Dr. Ho Pak Leung, director of the WHO Collaborating Center for Infectious Disease Epidemiology and Control at the Hong Kong University, has also spoken up on the urgent need for a border closure against the mainland, and that the difference between banning entry in the Hubei province alone, as opposed to the entire China, and not banning entry from anywhere at all, is unsubstantial. Article 154 of the Basic Law stipulates that the Hong Kong government has the freedom to determine its immigration control. The very least that the Hong Kong government can do is issue a travel warning for China. But yet Carrie Lam and her lackeys continue to disregard the lives of 7 million in favor of petty political concerns, even making immature and moronic statements blaming protesters for the shortage of masks. We wonder if this is Carrie Lam's petty way of retaliation for a political crisis entirely of her own making and indecision, by exposing Hong Kong citizens to unnecessary risk. A government that has not been publicly elected has repeatedly shown that its negligence towards the people's will, and now its people's lives. Even the pro-Beijing supporters are disappointed at the government's response, seeing its utter lack of morality and basic standards. The government's incompetence to use its experience from 2003 and duly handle this epidemic means that we Hong Kong citizens can only stand for ourselves and save ourselves. This is the reason why we took to our streets last summer and why we're still there today. We don't only feel neglected by our government, we feel that we're sold out and exploited by the government and its rotten system and its corruption. Hong Kongers have woken up to the fact that only a democratically elected government will truly take responsibility for its people, will truly be held accountable, and that the current administration is beyond hopeless. We pray that all of us can weather the storm of this crisis together, as we have done through many crises in the past, and we will all live to the day when we finally meet under the pot. Take good care of yourselves and your health. Liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our times. The Citizens Press Conference has also 5 questions to ask the government, and it requests that the government respond to these questions as immediately as possible to assuage public concerns over the coronavirus. First, given the large number of Hong Kongers returning from China, what policy measures will the Hong Kong government take to address this problem? Second, in recent days, our frontline medics have discovered that patients have not fully disclosed their medical history, with some of them even escaping from their prior hospitals. In this case, why are voluntary measures still even effective? Third, the Hong Kong government has stated it is politically inappropriate and unnecessary and infeasible to do border controls. Under what conditions will the Hong Kong government seal its borders? Fourth, the Hong Kong government asserts it has already tried to track potential virus carriers. But exactly how many of the infected have they actually interacted with and tracked it? Have they tracked everyone who were traveling on the same high-speed rail carriage as the carriers? 5. Public hospital bed occupancy rates are already at full capacity, and medical experts estimate that the peak of outbreak will be in February or March. How will the government deal with this influx? Will they prioritize Hong Kong citizens that they were meant to serve, or continue to let our medical resources be taken over by mainland citizens? 6. The Wuhan government stated that 5 million have fled from Wuhan prior to its lockdown. The Macau government has been able to track and say exactly how many of them are currently in Macau right now. Why can't the Hong Kong government do the same? 7. The government has repeatedly asserted that the situation is not serious. Why then did they prepare 3 resorts and 1 public housing building as quarantine zones that can hold up to 3,000? If they have taken such drastic measures, why then the lax preparation in all other matters? 8. How will they protect our frontline medics to ensure that they have a safe working environment? How much of the funds will they actually allocate into the provision of medical supplies and protective equipment? And 9th, Article 154 states that Hong Kong government has full immigration control over its borders. Until so far, Hong Kong government has not issued any travel warning to China. Citizens have discovered that 2 hours before the Hong Kong government issued a travel restriction to everyone from Wuhan. Wuhan has already suspended permits for its citizens coming to Hong Kong. Does this mean the Hong Kong government has lost all its autonomy? Does it need the parties' approval before they can make any single decision? Thank you.